When have you experienced God as a real presence in your life? That's something I'll often ask at a retreat or at a Bible study or when a small group comes together to look at, who is God for us and how do we have that sense of divine presence? Probably the one that's the most response, and you won't be surprised at this, is people will say, at the birth of a baby. Yeah. And how awesome. Or it may be the birth of a child, or I know for some of you too, then the birth of a grandchild. Just so appreciating that preciousness of life. Other things that people may mention, certainly getting married. Also out in nature, some people will talk about an awesome experience they had from nature and God as ultimate creator that just really spoke to them and touched their heart. Sometimes it may be somebody in our life or somebody we even read about or see on TV who is just so good and so loving and so kind and maybe went the extra mile for somebody and helped them out. And we can be touched by that goodness and love and somehow have a sense of God in there. Certainly as Catholic Christians, we can be mindful of our religious rituals and hopefully how God speaks to us through them. We know, again, with baptism coming up, with a marriage, we know that even when we come here each week, that hopefully through communion, which is Jesus' real presence, and through hearing God's word or the homily, maybe something touches our hearts. Some people through the Lenten season or through a parish retreat, we had one yesterday, will say, wow, giving God more time, being more mindful, aware, and I had that sense of God's goodness. And often when people mention that, very understandably they'll say, wow, I've been changed. I'll be different from now on forever. This has just been so powerful, and hopefully that can happen, at least somewhat. But I want to talk now about an example of one fella. I'm using, this is a true fellow, I'm using a little bit of his story to say it's a story that I've heard by many people. We need to know that sometimes what is most deeply personal is most universal. Now, for the sake of this conversation, I'll call him Ken in honor of Ken and Barbie. Okay? Anyway. Ken coming to me, and he was one, again, a real person who got very involved in Lent and Holy Week and Easter and made a retreat after that. And he was very alive in faith. It was great to see that for him. It was new for him. But then he came to me probably 2, 3, 4 weeks later, and he was disillusioned. Because this was going to be different, it was going to be forever changed, and it already is, he said, messed up 2 weeks after all of that. And he felt bad, because there was a stressor in his life and just got to him. And he was putting himself down because, having come so close to the Lord, I shouldn't have let it happen to me that way. And then also, and remember, I'm talking about Ken, as a lot of people similarly would say, I hear at church, Father, that we talk about we're supposed to all be disciples of Jesus Christ. And people will often say to me, I'm not that great a disciple. Look at this. I don't even know if the Lord will recognize me as a follower of him because I haven't been so great in it. In those circumstances, with a variety of people, I will often use today's gospel to make a point, to give a perspective. And we've said this before, Matthew, the gospel writer, when they're writing, they're not only telling us about detailed circumstances in the life of Jesus and his disciples, but all those stories are meant to speak to our hearts. In some way, maybe we can't identify fully with them, but see, God, you have a message here even 2,000 years later for me and for us. So, the example of Peter. I mean, he was chosen as the leader already of the disciples by Jesus. He had gone up the mountain with him. He was there when they're feeding the 5,000. Peter was right there, very present. He was a disciple. And yet, we can look in a lot of other scriptures too, but look at today's gospel. First of all, here's all the disciples that Jesus has already spent 2 years in formation with them, calling them to deeper faith. And of course, the storm comes up, doesn't it? And they're in the boat, and they're frightened. You can even understand maybe why, and even what's this coming to them? Is it a ghost? And Jesus, one more time, wants to speak to them and say, hey, no, you need to have faith. They needed to hear that from Jesus over and over and over again, as we probably do through a lifetime. And there, Peter, okay, he was originally having that fear, but God bless him, he took a step out, because when he realized it was Jesus, he said, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come, walk on the water, and come to you, and I will. Again, a beautiful expression of living faith, at least the intention, you know? And so what happens? He takes those steps, which was good. But it didn't take long. The wind and the waves all stronger, and kerplunk, down under, you know? Good intention. Oh, I can't believe this, and here I'm messing up again, and that's Peter. But then again, even there, he has some dimension of faith, because as he's going under, he says, save me, Lord. He knew, even though he messed up, the Lord still loved him, and he knew, even though he fell short of being that disciple who could walk on water, he knew the Lord would still be there with him anyway. The Lord would still be his Savior, would deliver him from fear, from sin, from any of that. A powerful example isn't that for all of us. We are all in some way probably a mix of faith and doubt, and it can be one moment like this and later in the day like that. And that was the disciples. Disciples, again, the notion of following Jesus, those original disciples didn't have it all together. And the reminder that the Lord still chose them. And in part, we all need to be mindful of this, because as Jesus' followers, as his disciples, we're not proclaiming how great we are, we know better. We're proclaiming how great God is, and how God can be there even through us. Jesus never tires of forgiving us. Jesus never tires of picking us back up again. We can sell ourselves short. The Lord doesn't. He never gives up on us, on ourselves, or even the people around us. To trust that, to believe that. That's the kind of loving God that we have, even when we mess up. That's not Jesus' focus. And as we look at that, I know another reason that sometimes people think you have to be practically this perfect disciple is I've seen this at retreats, I've seen this on television, evangelists and so forth, where somebody can say, yeah, before I found Jesus, my life was a mess. I did this wrong, that wrong, I have drugs, whatever. Since I found Jesus, it's been great. No problems, everything's been wonderful, just been praying every day, just filled with joy of the Lord. You know, and is that necessarily true? I mean, people can mean it, but I think and I find in people's lives, after all, this is not about any of you, okay? But I do hear a lot of confessions. And these are some people who've come to the Lord already and still mess up. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But the point being that we need to understand, even when we give witness to other people, it's not, I got it all together now, true joy, peace forever. Granted, hopefully we have some of those gifts. Hopefully our life has a greater meaning and purpose, but not perfection. And being able to say that to other people, because I've run into people who, when they messed up, they'd say, I'm not going back to church again. Look, it didn't make that big a difference. We need to let people, don't go there. We come here not because we have it all together. We come here because we're a community of people that in some ways are at least slightly messed up and can convey this is a good place to be. And I know another example of that is even my own example. People have said to me, Father Norm, I can't be as positive, as enthusiastic, as good at communicating as you are. And then they put themselves down. And I say, well, hey, first of all, we all have different gifts. We're not all the same. We all bring different aspects to faith. And then I tell them, I fess up, hey, I certainly don't have it all together. When I started out as a priest, I know I didn't, and maybe in 49 years I'll finally have it all together. Not true, okay? We go through a lifetime, and still from time to time we mess up one way or the other. And we don't have to get down. We don't have to say, what's the use? We don't have to say, why make another retreat? It doesn't make a difference. Over the long haul of life, in every circumstance, that we can believe, hey, God, one more time, we're seeing what a merciful, understanding God you are, that we can experience that and pass it on. One final example I want to use, because we had a retreat yesterday, and one of the themes was vulnerability. And again, that being vulnerable, that even as we're following Jesus, even those disciples, that, there's ways that we still need the Lord to heal and to strengthen and to guide. For me, I think some of you heard it already, last week at the 8:30 Mass, when I was praying over I'll get Jeffrey, I better get his name right. When I was praying over Jeffrey, because he was leaving us. He's the seminarian who's been here a full year. And I was praying over him, and of course I just started blubbering, and oh, God, bless you, it was terrible, But for me, part of that wasn't just that, but the attitude interiorly I took. Boy, I shouldn't get like this. After all, real men don't cry. You grow up with that. And now somebody knows this. What's the line that Tom Hanks uses in A League of Our Own? He says what? Look at this. You people must be old, because that was a lot of years ago. There's no crying in baseball. So there I am. And realizing in the moment, it was certainly okay and beautiful that I was teary-eyed about a friend that I've had for a year that's going to be moving on. And Jesus wept at the death of his friend Lazarus. Jesus wept over the people of Jerusalem. Weeping and being vulnerable, it can be beautifully human, showing that disciples Jesus has are human. But the point was, it wasn't bad that I blubbered, but it was the interior thing. I told you this, I have this thing called the ego check. Ego ease God out. I realized then, and even when I left, I thought, you know what? No, I didn't need to feel bad. I didn't need to feel less than because I blubbered. That was part of the human emotion of love, and that's what God calls us all to. But my ego went to this, they're going to look that I don't have it all together. Have been 8 years now. You must know I don't have it all together. But all of that. So the ego got caught up. Thankfully, briefly, like Peter, okay, I messed up, but I can say in some smaller way, hey, save me, Lord. Save me, Lord, from self-consciousness. Save me, Lord, from being worried about how other people see me. Keep saving me, Lord, to be the human being you created me and you and every one of us to be. That we don't need to apologize. Are we perfect? Heavens no. Does the Lord love us and bring us through, and even maybe 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or vice versa? Whatever it is, to come here today, that's why we started even to say, God have mercy. And to each one of us, what's something you need to hear in what I said today? Is there something of your story in there? Is there something right now the Lord may want to speak to your heart as we all go forward in faith, hope, and love? And don't do it so perfectly, but do it in a way that Jesus still calls us to be his disciples, telling the whole world you can be a Christian even if you're kind of messy. Take a quiet moment. God bless.